Hey guys, I have a smallish rant I want to go on today about baking. So, I don't know if you're like me. If you love to bake, raise your hand. Love to bake right here. Grew up baking. My mom always baked for me. That was something I always did with and for my kids. Um, Especially like banana bread, zucchini bread, that kind of stuff. And this time of year is when I always started baking. Um, Baking is awesome and it's a fun way to bond with your kids. It's tradition in a lot of our families to bake. It's a beautiful time we spent with our parents. And for me, it is a really, really difficult thing to give up. Um, I have a lot of clients this week who've been struggling with baking. They've been on plan, they've been doing really well, and then they bake maybe some zucchini bread for themselves or their family or a neighbor. And then they call me and say, I just ate like 5 slices of zucchini bread, or I made banana bread muffins for my kids. And, I love making it for their breakfast, but then I ate like 5 of them when they went off to school. Um, Another client said, I made zucchini bread and I just have zucchinis coming out my ears. What else are you supposed to do with them other than make bread? Um, Here's the problem, guys. Homemade food is so delicious and it's almost impossible to say no to. It makes your house smell so good. So you've got like the baking process, then you've got the cooling process, then it's sitting out on the counter, then it's going to only be good for a couple days. So you kind of justify in your mind it's homemade, it doesn't last forever. You tend to overeat it. If you guys are anything like me, like you way overeat it. You say maybe you're going to have a slice and that turns into 3 slices and then it turns into a stomach ache. Lucky you if you don't get stomach aches. I always do. But that never stopped me from overdoing it on banana bread and zucchini bread. And by the way, I always made banana bread muffins for my kids for school, for school mornings. And then they'd go to school and I'd eat like 4 of them after I told myself, usually after like a 2-hour workout, I'd go eat 4 muffins and just undo it. And, what I found is that on plan, when I got on plan with Optavia, that was a huge trigger for me. That homemade baking was a huge trigger for me. And for you husbands, if your wives are baking, I know that's probably a trigger for you. It's something you really love. And so what happened for me is after I went off plan like twice with homemade pumpkin chocolate chip cookies, and homemade banana muffins, I realized that I was like a drug addict and baking was like my drug. And it's easy to justify because you're telling yourself it's a tradition, it's something you do to bond with your kids. Um, Whatever it is that you tell yourself, I know because I tell myself this exact same thing. I can't not do it. I told myself I could not do it because that's how I grew up. And I'm like, what would I do with my kids if I wasn't baking? What's happening is those zucchinis, instead of, rotting in the garden, they're just getting stuck to your butt. Like for reals, people, I was wearing like a zucchini on each butt cheek. You saw my pictures. That is what it came from, is zucchinis and bananas. It was fruit and vegetables, right? So it's fruit and vegetables. So it can't be bad for you. So last year, after I went off plan a couple times with homemade baked goods, I had to really have like this come to Jesus moment where I looked in the mirror and I said, Steph, you can't resist this stuff. You need to not bake it. And your family's going to survive. And this was one of the hardest things I did. I told myself, you know what, until I'm to my healthy weight, I'm not going to bake because I know when I bake, I'm going to go off plan. Even if I tell myself I'm not going to, I know I'm lying to myself. So I didn't do it. I stopped baking. And the world did actually not come to an end. And if my kids wanted a cookie, I took them to the bakery and I got them a store-bought cookie, which doesn't even tempt me at all. I'd rather have one of my bars and lose 1.5 pounds that week. this might be a tradition you need to really examine and decide if you're strong enough to continue it, because I wasn't, and I'm like an alcoholic that decides to be a bartender. Maybe after like 5 years of sobriety, 10 years of sobriety, I could maybe do that. But like for me to bake, that's my drug of choice, homemade baked food. I can't go there because I can't say no. I am an amazing baker. I'm sorry, I'm just going to brag about it right now. I know how to bake. I'm like really good at it. My mom was really good at it. My grandma was. They taught me the ways. And this is probably how I got in the mess I was in the first place. I've had issues with my weight my whole entire life. And that's probably because every Sunday my mom made a cake or brownies or cookies, and I ate half of them because I can't stop, because sugar is my drug of choice. There are actually other things you can do to bond with your kids. It takes more work. Like, let's just call it out. Is it more work? Yes, it is. You're going to have to play a game. You're going to have to play cards. You're going to have to get out a board game. You're going to have to go for a walk. You're going to have to go for a drive. You might have to get out of the house. You got to find something for your hands to do. You have to replace that time that you spent bonding with your kids with something else. You can't just pull it out of your life and act like that it was never there, because there'll be kind of a hole there where you feel like there was something special there and now there's nothing. You have to fill that in. So this is part of what we do. This is part of our mindset training. This is part of a new lifestyle and new habits. For me, yeah, I can go back to having a little slice of birthday cake. I can go back to going to some parties and having a little piece of dessert when I'm in maintenance. That's not going to affect me. But baking every single Sunday afternoon, that's going to put me right back in the place that I was in before, which was, wearing black stretchy pants every day because I don't have any jeans that fit. It's kind of sad. And today I was talking with my good friend about it, and she's like, it's kind of sad. And I said, I know. I almost had to have like a moment of silence and tell myself, like, this is sad. This is a thing that I really loved and I have to give up to be in a different place. And I'm not telling you guys you have to give up baking, okay? Like, a lot of you bake maybe for a living and you don't really care about it anymore and you don't enjoy it. But if you are someone that you find every time you make homemade cookies or homemade cake or homemade brownies or whatever it is, if you find you are sabotaging yourself by overeating it, it's time to revisit that habit of cooking and that tradition of baking and see if maybe you can replace it with a healthy habit. Because I don't know about you, but my family, we all have weight problems. And maybe your kids don't have weight problems yet, but mine actually, my daughter came to me and my husband came to me and they both said, will you please stop baking? We can't resist this delicious baked food you make. And I know you're strong enough to resist it. So here's kind of what I was doing. I was kind of baking and not eating it just because I love the smell. And I kind of liked watching my family eat it. Like, it gave me this weird pleasure watching them stuff their face with all the stuff that I couldn't eat. It kind of filled in that gap for me. And then I realized, like, gosh, my daughter has to be careful with what she eats, and so does my husband. And my son Fox doesn't really have to be careful, but he said, Mom, I get a stomach ache on Sundays when you make, cupcakes or brownies or cake or cookies, because I eat too much and then I don't feel good. And it's like, here's my family begging me to change this tradition, but I feel like it's something I have to do because it's a tradition. So now's the time for a little bit of tough love from Steph, where I'm telling you, like, hey, if you can continue this tradition and you can just treat yourself with a cookie, you're awesome. I wish I could do that, but if you can, go ahead and keep doing it. And if it's okay and your family doesn't have weight problems and that's a beautiful thing you share, do it. Totally do that. That's awesome. If you find that you have problems with your weight and your kids are developing weight problems and you can't stop yourself from baking and you can't stop yourself from eating it, now is the time to look at this and go, is this tradition serving me and my family? If it's not, replace it with a new one. Let me know what you come up with. Share it to the page, whatever you can do, but like, really give me some feedback here. If this is something that you notice is a trigger for you and you're having a hard time with it consistently across the board, and if you look back on your life, you see that you've had problems with this in the past, This is something that you need to do stop, challenge, choose with. I'm going to stop baking. I'm going to challenge this. Is it necessary? Do I have to keep doing it? And I'm going to make a choice. Yes, I can keep doing this. I can do it in moderation, or I'm going to choose something else to bond with my family. Okay, let me know what you guys think.